The moment arrived with little warning, a ripple in the vast fabric of space. Subtle, almost imperceptible, was all that preceded the arrival of the human vessel. It had drifted into the outer edge of monitored space like a whisper on the wind, silent and unassuming. The Empire's long-range sensors detected it first, an anomaly among the usual cosmic drift. Initial scans returned nothing familiar. No known propulsion signature, no matching energy profile. Just a strange shape, elongated and angular, unlike anything recorded in the Empire's extensive archives. The council was convened within hours. Holographic projections filled the chamber, displaying the unknown ship from every angle. Some members leaned forward eagerly, others remained still, unreadable. Debate was swift but controlled. Was this a probe, a scout, or something more? There was no precedent for this. For centuries, the Empire had been the dominant force in its sector, meeting and absorbing dozens of species, each time expanding its reach and influence. But never before had they encountered a civilization that did not already know them. Then came the signal. It was crude by their standards, simple pulses modulated into recognizable patterns. Language, not just any language, but structured communication. Consciousness, intention. The realization sent a quiet tremor through the room. Someone, or something, had come to speak with them. Within days, the humans revealed themselves. Their envoys stepped out of the vessel clad in sleek, form-fitting material that shimmered under the artificial light of the docking bay. They were small compared to many of the Empire species, bipedal, pale-skinned, with expressive eyes and mouths that moved constantly as they spoke. Their voice, when translated to the Empire's linguistic processors, was sharp and precise, yet oddly warm. They called themselves humans. Earthborn, a young species, they claimed, eager to learn, to share, to explore. They brought gifts, small tokens of goodwill, crystalline data slates encoded with images of their homeworld, recordings of music and speech, even simple tools fashioned from materials unfamiliar to the Empire scientists. These offerings were received with polite curiosity, though many dismissed them as primitive. Still, there was something about the humans that fascinated the Empire. Their adaptability was remarkable. Within hours of landing, they adjusted to the atmospheric conditions without complaint. They asked questions relentlessly, soaking up knowledge like sponges. Their envoys smiled often, laughed at appropriate moments, and seemed to understand nuance far better than expected for a species so new to interstellar diplomacy. The first formal meetings were held in neutral chambers designed to accommodate multiple species' physiological needs. The humans sat across from the Empire's representatives, towering beings of chitinous exoskeletons and bioluminescent markings, or fluid entities suspended in containment fields. Despite the disparity in appearance, the humans held their own. They spoke confidently, listened intently, and responded with surprising wisdom. But beneath the surface, there were oddities, small inconsistencies in their history, vague references to conflicts they refused to elaborate on. When pressed about past wars, they deflected with humor or redirected the conversation toward trade agreements or scientific cooperation. Some council members noted these evasions but chose to ignore them, attributing the discomfort to cultural differences or youthful naivety. What stood out most was their eagerness to integrate. Unlike other species who hesitated before accepting the Empire's protection, the humans embraced it. They expressed admiration for the Empire's structure, its unity, its power. They praised its leaders, quoted historical victories, and offered insights into governance that surprised even seasoned advisors. Their flattery was subtle, their charm effortless. In the weeks that followed, the humans became fixtures in diplomatic circles. They attended galactic conferences, dined with high-ranking officials, and toured research facilities. They observed everything, asked endless questions, and always seemed one step ahead in understanding the Empire's inner workings. And yet, something lingered in the minds of a few observers, a sense of unease that could not be explained. It was not fear nor outright distrust, but a nagging feeling that things were too smooth, too perfect. The humans had appeared at a time when the Empire was seeking new allies, eager to expand its influence beyond contested territories. Their arrival felt convenient. Still, the Council saw no reason to doubt them. They were, after all, only a young species. What harm could they bring? That assumption would prove costly. As the months passed, the humans continued to ingratiate themselves deeper into the Empire's systems. They formed advisory roles in economic planning, assisted in military logistics, and contributed to scientific advancements with unexpected efficiency. Their presence became normalized, their influence quietly growing. No one noticed the cracks forming until it was too late. Because behind the smiles, behind the carefully chosen words and generous gestures, the humans carried secrets. Secrets that would shake the very foundation of the Empire once uncovered. But for now, all was well. The humans had arrived, and the Empire welcomed them with open arms. The humans moved through the Empire like water, effortless, adaptable, and always finding the path of least resistance. Their envoys were granted increasing levels of access, first to trade negotiations, then to military councils, and eventually even to classified archives under the guise of cultural exchange. They asked for little but received much, their requests framed as curiosity rather than entitlement. Over time, they became trusted voices in policy discussions, offering insights that, while foreign in origin, often proved surprisingly effective. Their presence was not without controversy. Some factions within the Empire remained wary, noting how quickly the humans had ingratiated themselves into positions of influence. Yet, these concerns were dismissed by those who saw opportunity in their integration. The humans brought a fresh perspective, and outsiders eyed that questioned long-held assumptions. They proposed new methods of resource distribution, streamlined diplomatic procedures, and introduced unconventional strategies in conflict resolution that yielded unexpected results. What made them particularly valuable was their ability to mediate between species with deep-rooted animosities. Where others saw centuries of rivalry, the humans saw patterns, behaviors that could be redirected or reframed. They did not impose solutions but nudged conversations toward compromise, often framing decisions in ways that benefited the Empire's long-term stability. Their diplomacy was subtle, never overtly favoring one faction over another, yet always ensuring the Empire maintained control of the outcome. Behind closed doors, however, things were different. It started with small inconsistencies, minor contradictions in historical records, discrepancies in dates or events when reviewing human archives. At first, these were assumed to be translation errors or differences in how time was measured on Earth. But as more data was exchanged, deeper anomalies emerged. Conflicts mentioned in passing that lacked detailed documentation. References to wars that ended abruptly without clear victors. Entire planetary systems erased from maps as if they had never existed. Then came the intercepted transmissions. Not official communications, but fragments. Private messages between human envoys, encrypted and buried within routine diplomatic traffic. These were flagged only after an anomaly was detected during a standard security audit. The decrypted contents were disturbing. Conversations about lessons learned, about necessary sacrifices, about what had to be done on Earth before true unity could be achieved. There were no outright admissions of guilt, no smoking gun, but the implications were undeniable. More troubling still were the behavioral shifts. Under stress, some envoys exhibited signs of discomfort, microexpressions, hesitation in speech, a tendency to avoid certain topics entirely. When questioned, they deflected with practiced ease, redirecting attention to more favorable subjects. It was almost too perfect, too rehearsed. One particular incident stood out. During a joint military exercise, an alien officer made a passing remark about past wars, specifically about civilian casualties deemed unavoidable in the pursuit of victory. Most present ignored it, but one human envoy stiffened visibly. For a brief moment, his mask slipped, his expression darkened, his jaw tightened, and he looked away. It lasted only seconds, but it was enough for some to notice. That moment lingered in the minds of those who saw it. Doubt began to spread, not among the masses, not yet, but within the upper echelons of the Empire's leadership. Quiet meetings were held behind closed doors, where officials reviewed everything they knew about humanity. What had once been seen as youthful enthusiasm now seemed calculated. Their eagerness to integrate, their rapid rise in influence, their uncanny ability to predict political outcomes. It all pointed to something more deliberate than mere diplomacy. And yet, there was still no concrete evidence. No irrefutable proof of wrongdoing. Only suspicion. Fragment of information that, when viewed individually, meant little, but when pieced together, formed a picture that was difficult to ignore. Some argued for further investigation. Others urged caution, warning that accusations without proof could destabilize the fragile trust that had been built. And so, for now, the matter remained buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and discretion. But the seeds of doubt had been planted, and in the quiet corridors of power, whispers began to circulate. Questions about what the humans were truly hiding, and whether the Empire had welcomed its greatest threat under the guise of peace. The revelation came not with a declaration, but with silence. A single data breach, accidental, or perhaps inevitable, unlocked the floodgates. The Empire's intelligence division had been running routine audits on diplomatic transmissions when an anomaly was flagged in a seemingly innocuous file transfer between two human envoys. Encrypted within layers of benign trade reports and cultural exchange logs was something far more damning. A hidden archive, buried so deep it evaded even the most advanced scans. When the files were decrypted, what they revealed changed everything. At first, the images were dismissed as forgeries, too graphic, too extreme to be real, but cross-referencing confirmed their authenticity. These were not simulations, not dramatizations. They were records, raw, unfiltered footage from Earth itself. Cities burning under nuclear fire, mass graves dug by trembling hands, soldiers executing prisoners without trial, civilians rounded up and exterminated in vast numbers, their bodies stacked like cargo. The humans had committed atrocities, not in secret, not in shadows, but openly, systematically, across centuries of their own history. There were documents detailing genocides justified as liberation, audio recordings of leaders justifying mass starvation as economic necessity, visual evidence of entire populations wiped out in the name of conquest, ideology, or simple survival. And worst of all, there were files showing that some of the very envoys currently embedded within the Empire had once held positions of authority during these events. The news spread like wildfire. What began as a restricted leak among high-ranking officials soon escaped into broader networks. Once exposed, it could not be contained. Holographic displays across planetary capitals played the footage on endless loops. Council chambers erupted into chaos. Public forums turned into battlegrounds of outrage and disbelief. Betrayal. That was a word whispered in every corridor, spoken in every council chamber, shouted in every protest. The humans had come bearing smiles and promises, and behind them lay a trail of blood. Some factions within the Empire demanded immediate expulsion. Others called for retribution. A few, still stunned, insisted that this was only part of the story, that past actions did not define an entire species. But those voices were drowned out by the rising tide of anger. The humans responded swiftly, though not with remorse. Their official statements denied the severity of the footage, calling it taken out of context, and accusing the Empire of falling for propaganda. Some envoys attempted damage control, arguing that humanity had learned from its mistakes, that they had evolved beyond their violent origins. But the damage was done. Trust, once broken, could not be easily repaired, and the deeper the Empire delved, the worse it got. More files surfaced, records of biological experiments conducted on unwilling subjects, of wars fought not for survival but for dominance, of planetary ecosystems deliberately destroyed for resource extraction. The humans had not merely survived their history, they had thrived in it. The political fallout was immediate. Alliances fractured. Former supporters of human integration were forced to distance themselves, their credibility crumbling under public scrutiny. Diplomatic ties strained as other species within the Empire questioned whether they too had been deceived. Some worlds imposed restrictions on human movement. Others severed contact entirely. The military, once eager to collaborate with human strategists, now viewed them as potential saboteurs. Security clearances were revoked. Research projects involving human consultants were suspended. Intelligence agencies launched internal investigations to determine the extent of human influence on policy decisions. And then came the disappearances. Some envoys fled before they could be detained. Others were found dead, officially ruled as suicides, though many suspected otherwise. Those who remained were placed under heavy surveillance, their movements restricted, their communications monitored. What had once been a diplomatic presence became an occupation. The Empire stood at a crossroads. No longer could it pretend ignorance. No longer could it justify trust. The humans had not simply concealed their past. They had manipulated the present to ensure their future. And now, the question loomed over every leader, every citizen. What do we do with them? There was no easy answer. Only the cold realization that peace had never been their goal, and that the war had already begun. The Empire did not collapse, but it changed irreversibly. The revelation of humanity's hidden history sent tremors through every level of governance, reshaping policy, redefining trust, and rewriting the rules of diplomacy. What had once been an era of cautious expansion and integration now gave way to a new doctrine: vigilance. Security protocols were rewritten overnight. No species would ever again be granted access so freely. Every new contact would undergo rigorous historical scrutiny, cultural audits, and psychological profiling before being allowed into the Empire's inner circles. The humans had exposed a vulnerability, one that would not be repeated. But even as the Empire fortified itself against deception, the damage was done. The illusion of unity had been shattered. Where once there had been faith in the Council's wisdom, now there was doubt. Where once the Empire had prided itself on its ability to judge character across species, now there was only the bitter knowledge that they had been played. Some factions called for war. Others demanded isolation. A few still whispered that humanity was not beyond redemption, that perhaps, despite their past, they could change. But these voices were drowned out by the weight of evidence, by the footage that still played in the minds of those who had seen it. The humans themselves became fugitives in all but name. Those who remained within the Empire were confined to restricted zones, stripped of influence, watched constantly. Some resisted. Others accepted their fate with quiet resignation. A handful disappeared into the void, fleeing to unknown corners of space where the Empire's reach did not yet extend. And yet, even in exile, humanity's shadow lingered. Their technology, though primitive, had left an imprint. Their strategies still influenced military doctrine. Their words, carefully chosen and subtly persuasive, had shaped policies that could not simply be undone. They had not merely infiltrated. They had embedded themselves in the very framework of the Empire. In time, the outrage faded, replaced by something colder. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but calculation. The Empire no longer saw the humans as allies or even enemies, but as variables, unpredictable, dangerous, but potentially useful if handled correctly. So the question remained, what to do with them? Some advocated containment, others extermination. But the most pragmatic among the leadership understood one thing: the humans had survived their own worst instincts. They had endured catastrophe after catastrophe, rising from the ashes each time. To underestimate them now would be folly. And so, the Empire made its decision. Humanity would not be destroyed. Not yet. Instead, they would be studied, controlled, observed, their movements tracked, their communications monitored, their potential harnessed only when absolutely necessary. They would be kept close, not as friends, not as equals, but as weapons waiting to be used. It was not peace. It was not war. It was something in between: a cold, calculated coexistence built on mutual distrust. Across the Empire, statues of human envoys were torn down. Records of their contributions were redacted. Their names were spoken with caution, as if invoking them might summon the ghosts of their past. Yet, in the shadows, there were those who still admired them, who saw in their survival not just cruelty, but resilience, who believed that even the darkest species could find light, given enough time. But time was not on their side, because the Empire had learned its lesson, and it would never be fooled again. As the final human envoy was escorted from the Grand Council chambers, his expression unreadable, the doors sealed behind him with a sound like thunder. A new age had begun. one built not on trust, but on control. And in the silence that followed, the Empire stood stronger than before, wiser, more cautious, and forever changed by the species that had almost undone it. Not because they were powerful, but because they had taught the Empire the most important lesson of all. Even the most charming diplomat can carry blood on their hands. And sometimes, the deadliest threat comes bearing gifts.